All right, let's jump straight into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the absolutely fascinating ways that independent expats build and use social networks to actually thrive in a totally new country. You know, when people move across borders, it's so easy to just fixate on the physical logistics, the packing, the flights. But today, we're looking at the human architecture, the invisible web of connections that makes a monumental life change like that even possible.
I mean, we hear about assigned executives moving overseas all the time, right? But they usually have full support. We're talking housing, visas, language classes, all neatly tied up with a bow by their company. But the real adventure, and honestly the real challenge, kicks off when someone strikes out completely on their own. What actually happens when you leave your home country without that massive corporate safety net to catch your fall? To truly wrap our heads around the massive scale of this, we've got to look at the numbers. There are somewhere around 232 million international migrants navigating the globe right now. That is a staggering figure. And within that massive group, there's this rapidly growing subset of highly educated professionals who are just packing up their lives and seeking new opportunities entirely under their own steam.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the self-initiated expat, move into social capital theory, look at the research focus and methodology, then explore network composition and diversity, the roles of ties, and wrap it all up with implications and conclusions. Let's get to it.
Starting off with Section 1, the self-initiated expatriate. This perfectly illustrates the contrast we were just talking about. On one side, you've got assigned expatriates. These are the folks with corporate backing, sent abroad by their employer for a very specific, predetermined period. But then, look at the other side. Self-initiated expatriates, or SIEs. These brave individuals are funding their own move. They're seeking regular, local employment directly in the host country, and they're doing it for a completely undefined amount of time. They're driven by a totally different set of motivations, taking absolute ownership of their own international career trajectory.
Moving right along to Section 2, social capital theory.
So, how do these self-starters actually pull this off? How do they survive and succeed when they land in a totally foreign place, basically empty-handed? Well, that lack of corporate support is a massive hurdle, no doubt about it. And social capital, which is built through diverse and really strong relational ties, turns out to be their ultimate solution. In the context of international mobility, think of your social capital as your absolute survival toolkit. It can either supercharge your transition by giving you crucial local knowledge, or, if your network is too narrow, it can seriously hold you back. It is literally the difference between feeling completely lost and feeling like a true local.
Which brings us to Section 3, research focus and methodology.
To see this theory in action, returning to a deeply insightful academic study that takes all these abstract concepts and grounds them in real, lived human stories. Researchers Luisa Helena Pinto and Raquel Campos Arujo over at the University of Porto decided to focus specifically on highly skilled Portuguese professionals who left their home country chasing better opportunities. Now, Portugal is historically a country of emigration, right? And particularly after the economic downturn there, a ton of skilled professionals chose to self-initiate these temporary assignments abroad.
So the study gathered its data through semi-structured interviews with 13 individuals. And we aren't just talking about a bunch of corporate executives here. We're talking about architects, nurses, pharmacists, engineers, people who are geographically scattered all over the map, from nearby spots in Europe all the way to Angola, Brazil, East Timor, and even New Zealand. Having this kind of occupational and geographic diversity provides such a rich global perspective on how social networks form across vastly different cultural contexts.
Okay, on to Section 4, network composition and diversity.
Once these individuals actually land in their new countries, we really have to ask, what do their support networks look like? Who is actually in them? Well, there's this fascinating, inevitable shift that happens. Before they leave, their home networks, family and friends back in Portugal, are absolutely vital. They give that initial push, they help with the early online research, but naturally those ties start to fade over time simply because of the physical distance. On the flip side, the host networks in the new country gain tremendous importance. And what's super interesting is that for these self-initiated expats, these new host networks are heavily driven by the workplace. The company they join largely dictates the multicultural diversity of their brand new social circle.
Let's get into Section 5, the roles of ties. Zooming into the granular details here, let's look at exactly what these newly formed relationships actually provide. Because it's not just about having friends to grab a coffee with, it's about the specific utility of those relationships. These connections serve 4 really critical roles. First up, informational support.
literally just learning which bus to take or figuring out where to live. Second is instrumental support, like snagging a job referral or getting help navigating some tricky legal paperwork. Third is emotional support, which is absolutely crucial to combat the inevitable loneliness of being far from home. And finally, feedback support. This is that nuanced guidance on whether your behavior is actually culturally acceptable in your new environment.
Now, a truly crucial dynamic to recognize here is the concept of the anchor tie. The researchers found that almost every single participant had one main connection at their destination before they ever even packed their bags. This anchor tie is usually a fellow national already on the ground who basically becomes a mentor. And they don't just help the expats settle in, they actively introduce them to new friends. They act like a seed from which the entire new host network eventually grows. It's a real game changer.
This concept is beautifully humanized by one of the participants, a 33-year-old living in Germany. She leaned heavily on a strong anchor tie, a fellow Portuguese expat, to figure out the unwritten cultural rules of local resumes, like knowing exactly what kind of photograph was acceptable to include. I mean, that is a textbook example of feedback support. Weak ties, like casual acquaintances, they might tell you where a job opening is, sure, but it takes a strong tie, someone who really understands your specific background, to give you honest, actionable feedback on how to adapt to succeed.
But then, in stark contrast, we also see that network building can be highly tactical. Take this 24-year-old expat in Brazil, who deliberately avoided the older Portuguese diaspora entirely. Why? Because the older generation of migrants had totally different academic qualifications and lifestyles. This self-initiated expat knew that true assimilation into the Brazilian workplace meant forging completely new, local bonds rather than just retreating into the easy comfort of a pre-existing ethnic bubble. Honestly, it highlights an incredible level of self-directedness.
And finally, Section 6, Implications and Conclusions. So how does this individual journey actually translate into an actionable framework we can use? The researchers map out a very clear 5-stage journey. Stage 1, expats are highly motivated to actively seek out support. Stage 2, they approach specific people for very specific needs, maybe using acquaintances for basic info and saving the close friends for emotional backing. Stage 3, they absorb that help over time. Stage 4, all this accumulated social capital directly enables their cross-cultural adjustment. And finally, Stage 5, repeated positive interactions lead to expanding the network even further. It's just this continuous, proactive loop of relationship building.
Which leaves us with a pretty profound realization about our own professional mobility. Whether you're moving across the world or honestly just starting a new job in a different city, managing the social capital around you requires real intent. Ask yourself, are you cultivating the right anchor ties? Are you seeking feedback from strong connections while intentionally broadening your network to get diverse information? Because, as we've seen, your success is quite literally determined by the network you build.
If you want to explore this methodology and dive into these fascinating first-hand accounts in full, I highly recommend checking out the complete study. It's by Pinto and Araujo, published in 2016, titled Social Networks of Portuguese Self-Initiated Expatriates in the Journal of Management Development, Volume 35, Issue 1, pages 89 to 103. You can find it at the DOI link right there on your screen, doi.org/10.1188/JMD-07-2014-069. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. As you log off, I want to leave you with one final thought. Who are the anchor ties in your own life right now, and are you intentionally building the network you need to truly thrive?